The cornfields swayed in the late summer breeze, golden and endless, hiding secrets beneath their rustling stalks. Somewhere in the middle of that quiet farmland, an 8-year-old girl's cries were swallowed by the wind. She wasn't just another child. She was the daughter of a woman the whole county whispered about, a woman both feared and respected. But to the bullies who cornered her that day, none of that mattered. Their laughter rang out cruelly, shattering the calm of the countryside as their blows rained down. They thought no one would ever know, but they hadn't yet realized who her mother was and what would come next. The farm stretched for miles, a patchwork of wheat, corn, and sun-burnt soil that had carried generations through hardship. In a small, weather-beaten farmhouse at the far edge of the land lived Anna Marie, a single mother whose strength was carved from years of struggle. She was a black woman in a town that never let her forget it. To some, she was invisible. To others, she was a reminder of everything they despised. Her daughter, Clara, was 8 years old, a lively girl with braids that bounced when she ran through the fields. She adored the animals, often sneaking crusts of bread to the farm dogs or whispering to the horses as if they were her best friends. But Clara didn't always smile. At school, she had learned to keep her head down. The children of farm hands and townsfolk had been taught to sneer at her skin, to mock her patched dresses, and to make her feel small. Still, her mother told her each night, "Your worth is not what they say it is, child. You are more." But cruelty has a way of finding those who shine, and in the last weeks of summer, the whispers had turned to taunts, and the taunts had begun to sharpen into something much darker. On the afternoon of August 14th, Clara wandered too far from the farmhouse. She followed the faint trickle of the creek, carrying a little basket of apples she had picked for her mother. She didn't hear the footsteps behind her. She didn't see the shadows gathering in the tall grass. She only realized, too late, that she wasn't alone. 4 boys, older and bigger than Clara, stepped out from the cover of the stalks. They weren't strangers. She had seen them at school, had felt the sting of their whispered names in the hallway. They were sons of men who drank too much and worked too little, boys who had been raised on anger. They circled her like wolves. The leader, a tall boy with sandy hair, sneered as he snatched the basket from her hands. The apples tumbled into the dirt. "Look at the little farm rat," one of them muttered, kicking one of the apples into the creek. Clara's heart pounded. She tried to back away, but the circle closed. Their voices grew sharper, their jeers cutting into her like knives. They called her names she didn't understand, words she knew were meant to hurt. She clutched the hem of her dress, praying silently that someone, anyone, would come. But no one came. The first shove sent her sprawling to the ground. Dust clung to her face, mixing with the tears she refused to let fall. She scrambled to her feet, but another boy blocked her path. His grin widened as he shoved her harder this time, and her knees buckled. The others joined in. Their laughter rose above the rustle of the corn. They shoved, kicked, and spat. Clara's cries were muffled by the endless fields, absorbed by the indifferent sky. The final blow came when one of them picked up a rock, not too big, but heavy enough, and hurled it at her head. It struck just above her temple. Clara's world went black. She crumpled, the dirt drinking in the blood from her small wound. For a moment, even the bullies went silent. The leader's chest heaved as he stared at what they had done. But instead of stopping, instead of helping, They spat on the ground and fled. Their laughter was quieter now, tinged with fear. The fields held their secret, but not for long. That evening, Anna Marie went searching when Clara didn't return for supper. Lantern in hand, she called out her daughter's name until her voice cracked. It was the dog that found her first, whining and pawing at the limp body by the creek. Anna Marie dropped to her knees. Her trembling hands hovered, then pressed against Clara's still chest. The faintest breath rattled through the child's lips. Relief and fury surged through her in the same heartbeat. Her daughter was alive, but someone had tried to take that from her. And Anna Marie knew this wasn't an accident. The town thought Anna Marie would remain silent. They had always counted on her silence. But when she carried her broken child into the hospital, every eye in the waiting room turned. The bruise on Clara's head was unmistakable, the gash still bleeding through the makeshift bandage. Whispers rippled through the crowd. Some pitied her, others smirked, as if it was expected. But Anna Marie's face was stone. She demanded the sheriff be called. The same sheriff who had ignored her reports of harassment. The same sheriff who had warned her to let things be. But this time, her voice carried a steel no one dared to interrupt. Word spread fast, carried from porch to porch, from bar to church pew. Within hours, everyone knew. 4 boys had cornered Anna Marie's daughter in the fields. When the sheriff finally dragged those boys into custody, the town's ugly underbelly spilled into the open. Some parents tried to excuse them. Boys will be boys, they said. Others turned their faces away, ashamed of what had been done in their name. But Anna Marie stood in the courtroom weeks later, her daughter's small hand wrapped tightly in hers. She didn't tremble. She didn't cry. She stared down each parent, each neighbor, each so-called friend who had looked the other way. Her silence was gone. In its place was fire. The trial was long, and the verdict was uncertain until the final day. For once, justice did not bow to prejudice. The boys were found guilty, not of childish mischief, but of assault. Their families wept, but Anna Marie did not. She only squeezed Clara's hand, whispering to her that they had been heard. Life did not become easier overnight. The stares remained, the whispers clung like shadows, but something had changed. Anna Marie was no longer a silent figure at the edge of the fields. She was a storm the town could not ignore. Clara healed slowly. The scar on her temple would always remain, but so would her mother's courage. She would grow to remember not only the cruelty of that day, but also the strength that followed. And the town remembered too. They remembered the night an 8-year-old girl nearly died, and the woman who refused to let her suffering be erased. Racism thrives in shadows, in whispers, in shrugged shoulders. But when faced with the unflinching light of truth, it trembles. So ask yourself, how many more Claras must bleed before we finally say enough?